We begin the current Daf Mesechtes Nedarim Daf. We begin 7 lines down or 6 lines up from the Amid, where the Gemara is in the middle of an interesting discussion, a conversation regarding this halacha of our previous Mishnah. We had a machlekes. Everyone agreed first that you cannot be mekayim a neder before it's made. It has to be something that was there that then you go and substantiate that. The machlekes was regarding how about being made for something until the neder wasn't made yet. Do you say that, hey, if it can be made for once it's made, for sure you can be made for it before it's made, like Rabbi Eliezer? Or do you say that no, is the hekesh in the Torah? It says, Ishi kemena v'ishi yifireno, esha balachol hakem balachol hefer. And we know that you cannot be mekayim until it's made. So you cannot be made for it. So therefore, that was the machlekes that we had. And in Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, that he said that it could be made for beforehand, the Gemara had a question. Is it that it takes effect, but then it's automatically batal, or it doesn't take effect at all? And that's how Gemara continues exploring if we can prove what he held in regards to that question. Today's Daf. Some of the discussed in today's Daf are hafara achlei chol. Like we said, regarding the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, whether one can make hafara for a neder before it was made. That's machlekes tanoim. And in the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, that he says that the Gemara is going to prove that lo chol and klal. That was the question. We didn't resolve it yet. And the Gemara, the next part of the Gemara is going to prove that he holds that it doesn't take effect at all. The next Mishnah continues this conversation and says the zman hafar. What's the maximum time for hafara that the husband or the father has the ability to be made for the neder? So the important terms of concept in today's daf are one of the rayas that the Gemara brings up a case of zoim tmeim. Shazarin bakarka tar. If you take tamei seed, you plant it in the ground, that actually makes it tar, and then the Gemara gets into the conversation, what does it prevent it actually from becoming tamei in the first place? And yesh shayvim paisim mecharata, some hold, the Gemara ends off just parenthetically with this idea, that some hold that you don't need to make a pesach. It's enough just to do becharata. I said, yeah, I regret what I had done, and I don't have to find a special opening to show why in the beginning that would mean say it was an error. I could just say, I have charata. So we begin the current daf, middle of daf ayin vav, 6 lines up from the bottom of the yamid. Like we mentioned, the Gemara is discussing this halach of our Mishnah hafar shlei chol, whether one can make hafar for a neder before it took effect. Rabbi Eliezer says you can be made for shlei chol. Chum said no, you cannot be made for ad shlei chol. Now, as we mentioned in the previous daf, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Gemara wanted to know the following question: do we say meichel cholin ubetelin that yes, the woman's neder is going to take effect. You can't prevent her from taking a neder. You just have the ability to be made for it. So it's going to take effect, and then it's going to be or do you say no, lechol klal? No, you preempted already, so she can't take a neder, and therefore it's not going to take effect. So what the nafkamina the Gemara said, a relevant difference would be in the case of another person associated a second neder with this neder. So let's say this woman said harein nezira, and another one says va'ani, and I want to be like her. So the question is, if you say it's chalmen et bottles havin frisusa, then neder can take effect because there is a moment that it actually is a neder, and that woman is transferring that moment for her neder. So the va'ani would be making a neder. Or do you say no, it's not nachal at all, and therefore like a mishasha, the second neder cannot take effect because there's no neder here at all, and therefore it wouldn't be any hatfasa. That was the Gemara's question. That was the nafkamina in this question. So the Gemara attempted a few rayas, and the Gemara did not have one, but now the Gemara continues. 6 lines up on the bottom of the Yom of Ayin Vav Manal. Toshama says he wants to bring a raya from the following brisa. I can prove to you what Rabbi Eliezer held in this question. Why? Because Amalehem Rabbi Eliezer, and we had all these brises that we see the background in the conversations in this machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, where they told him and he's telling them. So this is one of those cases. Rabbi Eliezer says to them, I'll prove to you that you could preempt. Like we were saying, I'll prove to you if you can do post, you can do pre. Which is this case of being made for me'ikara to hafar before it even took effect. What's my raya? Because we say, this is off. So I'm just going to take this off. So the raya is, umazram tmeim, if the seeds that are tummy, kivin shazron bekarka tahirin, since when you have tummy seeds, if you plant it in the ground, it's going to be tar. Where do you know this from? We learn from a pasuk that says, "A kozera zerua shizore atar." That's a real long pasuk in that way, but it's just saying any seed that's of a planting, which is going to be planted, is going to be tar. We see clearly from the Torah that if you take a seed and you plant it, so you make it tar. So if you have something that's already planted, and then subsequently something touches it, loy koshkin isn't a kal v'chaymer that they should be tahar. And Rabbi Eliezer is saying that you must agree to me in this kal v'chaymer. Why? Because if not, although that you hold that by Zram Tameim that become purified from the tumah when it's planted, how would you know that if something is already planted, that it is tar? Obviously, based on such a kal v'chaymer, and you learned it from this case itself, so then why don't you agree to me by the kal v'chaymer of our Mishnah? That was what Rabbi wanted to prove, that Zrum V'imdim has no pasuk, and yet everyone agrees that it's going to be tahar when it is planted. Obviously you know it because of a kal v'chaymer. If it's tummy and you plant it, and now it's connected to the ground, it purifies it. So if it's already connected to the ground, it's not going to be makabel tumah. It's going to be preventing it from tummy that you must know from this kal v'chaymer. So that's the brisa. Just that Rabbi Eliezer is trying to prove his argument that you see you could do a pre from the fact that you could do a post. Okay, but our main thing we want to bring from this is Shema Mina, but we can infer from this that obviously Rabbi Eliezer held loy chaylen. He wants to tell you when you learn that a pre from a post, that means to say if I could do a hafara in the woman's neder after she makes it, that post, kal v'chaymer I could do it to prevent it from happening in the first place, a pre, must be that it means to say it's not going to take effect at all. Why? Because most definitely by the case of the seeds, how are you going to qualify the tummy seeds? Obviously, it means to say that they should not take effect tumah at all in the first place. Why? Because if they would take effect, what would remove the tumah? If you're telling me that when it's planted already and then becomes tummy, it can't be that it becomes tummy and then it's going to be removed. There's no hafara here. Obviously, it means to say it's not going to come tummy in the first place. Oh, okay. So Rabbi Eliezer is comparing seeds to Nedarim. Obviously, Rabbi Eliezer holds, and this is actually the Gemara's resolution, that by Nedarim, it is like chayla, that it does not take effect, because he's comparing the equivalency of the cases to show you that his halacha that you could do pre, and obviously pre means beforehand that it's going to be not taking effect at the first. Okay, that concludes that Gemara's question that we had from the previous daf. But now the Gemara continues and says, why do they disagree with Rabbi Eliezer? They don't darshan a kal v'chaymer. In other words, don't they agree that you do darshan a kal v'chaymer from what took effect already to something that didn't even take effect yet, which is really this halacha b'afala? But Vatan, you learn in the brisa that they do make such a kal v'chaymer, which the Ran just points out. Why is the Gemara asking from this brisa on the Chachamim more than what we just quoted in the previous brisa that Rabbi Eliezer told them a kal v'chaymer of Zerayim? That Zerayim is exactly that case. So why is the Gemara asking from a new brisa? So says the Ran, first of all, because the Gemara didn't really know what the Rabbanah hold by Zerum B'Imdim. They didn't know. Maybe they don't hold that it prevents tumah from happening. Therefore, they're asking from a brisa that no one disagrees with. Or another approach is that maybe the Rabbanah hold that Zerum B'Imdim don't need a kal v'chaymer, because you can actually know it from the pasuk of a kol zerur zeroa, meaning that pasuk itself is telling you that if it's planted, it's going to be tar. Not only when it's tummy and then you're metar by putting it to the ground, that also then it does not become tummy. So the Gemara didn't want to ask from that brisa. We'll ask from a different brisa about that. Seemingly everyone agrees to the kal v'chaymer principle of learning out from what's before, from what already was. Because we have the following brisa. You would think that a person would sell his daughter when she's a naira, when she's over 12 years old, before she's 12 and a half. Amrit kal v'chaymer. How could you say that? A girl that was already sold at a 9-year-old girl, let's say. When she brings her simon, when she becomes a naira, she becomes 12. She comes out of the slavery. So a girl that's not even sold yet, and when she wasn't sold when she's a gitana, and now she's already 12 years old. Isn't a kal v'chaymer that if she already brought simon and pubic hairs, she's not going to be sold? Because if she was already sold, she'll come out when she becomes a naira. So she's already naira, for sure you cannot sell her. Now, this is that kal v'chaymer. The same idea. You're learning out post You're learning a pre from post, that you're saying if afterwards it'll remove, for sure from before, that you can't do it in the first place. So wait a second, so why don't you say the same thing in our Gemara, in our Mishnah? If it can be made from Nedarim took effect already, isn't it a Kavach Chaimer that Nedarim that he's being made for should not take effect at all? It's the same thing by the Naira. So why the Rabbanan disagree in our Mishnah? So the Gemara says yes, of course. The Alma in general, the halacha is the Dalshi Kavach Chaimer. They of course they do make such a Kavach Chaimer, like you see by Naga, by the girl with being sold by her father. But here it's different because, and we said this already in the Mishnah, it's a hekesh. Her husband will be mekayim it, or her husband will be made for it, which teaches us that which comes to the category of substantiating. Bolachal hefer comes the halacha of nullifying. That which does not come to the category of substantiating does not come to the category of hafara. So therefore, you could only be made only after she did the neder, because like we said, the Hakama Evan agreed you cannot do it if it wasn't made yet. Can't substantiate something that wasn't made yet. Hafara, you would have a svara to say, based on Kavachama, that you could, but the hekesh, the Torah is telling you, said Rabbanan, that it has to be Balachal Hekem, which it's not. Now, the Ran says, interesting conversation. He says, those who want to ask, and says, wait a second. If there's no pasuk, you're telling me the Rabbanan would agree to Rabbi Eliezer in his Kavach Chaimer. So then why did we quote on the previous daf Braises that the Chacham was saying mikveh yechiach? We had all these cases that were saying will prove to you that no, it's not true. What do you mean? You're telling me that they themselves agree that of course you do make such Kavach Chaimers. It's only because there's a pasuk that they're dashing. So we have this whole thing they were trying to prove. No, I'll show you mikveh that it'll be matar the tmeim, but it won't prevent a person from becoming tamei. You tell me you agree to the Kavach Chaimer. Says around what you could say is what the Chacham were telling him was very interesting. They were telling him, don't push yourself to reject our drasha of the hekesh because of your Kavach Chaimer. Why? What do you mean? Because they were saying mikveh yechiach. What will mikveh prove? That you could say a Kavach Chaimer. You could say mikveh metares hatameim for sure should prevent someone from becoming tamei in the first place. But what do we find? That the pasuk comes and excludes that because a mikveh does not save. Now, how do we know a mikveh does not save? We learn it out from a drasha. Because it says v'negei b'nevlasam yitma. Whoever touches the dead animal carcass will become tamei, which Hillel says, even if it's in the mikveh. So too the other halacha that they had said. A person that saves a ring that's swallowed in his body, that we learn out from a pasuk. Obviously we see that, although you would say a Kavach Chaimer, that, so wait a second, the person that swallows a tamei ring should be matarid because he prevents a ring from becoming tamei. We don't say that, we don't compare the two, obviously because a pasuk excludes it from the Kavach Chaimer. That's what the Chacham was saying in those brises. Similarly, by Hafaras Nedarim, don't disagree with our drasha because you want to make your Kavach Chaimer, because just like over there in those cases of mikveh and the swallowed ring, you yourself agree that the pasuk comes and excludes the Kavach Chaimer. Here also come and agree to us that the pasuk will exclude from the Kavach Chaimer. Now the Ran just points out one last point. He says, although up until this point we thought to say, and it was obvious from the way we're reading the Gemara, that the Rabbanan were asking on Rabbi Eliezer that no, you cannot make a Kavach Chaimer in those cases. He says, but Lamais in the Maskana of the Sugi, we come out that that's not what they were telling him. When they were saying mikveh yechiach, was not to say there's no Kavach Chaimer, was to say that the pasuk comes and excludes from the Kavach Chaimer, and therefore that was their point. We agree to you where we make usually such Kavach Chaimers. But when there's a gzeir zakat, when there's a hekesh, when there's a pasuk, a drasha, that would exclude the Kavach Chaimer, and that was their point. So therefore, that's why they don't agree to him in this case, simply because esha balachal hekem, balachal hefer, which you don't have here in this case.
We concluded that according to Rabbi Eliezer is lachayla.
Yes, exactly. The Gemara proved from that case of the Brisa because he's comparing it to the Zorayin, which obviously says the Ran Zorayin can't be that becomes tummy and then it disappears. It would have to be it doesn't become tummy in the first place. So yeah, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if a woman would say Harein Nazira and the husband had done a preemptive afar and another one says Va'ani, there's not going to be anything because there's nothing that's taking effect. It prevents it from ever taking effect in the first place. I'll look at the next Mishnah of continuing on this theme of hafaras nadarim. Again, the previous parak was talking about hataras nadarim, which the Chacham does, and this parak of Ne'emarasa, which was saying a joint of the father and the chassan, is talking about hafaras nadarim, which is just nullifying it bikana laba. Says the Mishnah, hafaras nadarim is kalayim. You could be made for neder the entire day that you hear about it from your wife or from your daughter. Now, says the Mishnah, yesh b'dav l'hakol l'hachmer. Now, in this is a leniency and a stringency. So the Ran says it doesn't really mean a kula or chumrah because it's not really applicable leniencies and stringency. What it really means to say is sometimes you're going to have a longer period of time to be made for, and sometimes you're going to have less. Meaning, it's coming to exclude that it's always a standard 24-hour period, which that would always be the same. We're saying no. The time the Mishnah holds, sometimes it's longer and sometimes it's shorter. Says the Mishnah Ketzah, how so? So it depends when she took the neder. Nadra b'leil Shabbos, which the Ram points out, it really has nothing to do with Shabbos per se. The same ramification would be on a weekday. The reason why we're picking Shabbos is a parenthetical chiddush to tell us that you could be made for neder on Shabbos, even though it's not even a Shabbos need. She didn't say, I'm taking a neder, I'm not eating meat, so now she can't have the chant and she can't whatever. That's not even a non-Shabbos need. The Gemara is going to be medayik from our Mishnah simply because you're limited to the day, and when Shabbos is over, even though really you shouldn't do havaras nadarim because it's like a bezdin and you don't do a din tay or whatever. But Maisa, if you don't do it now, she's going to be stuck with this neder for who knows how long. So that's a parenthetical chiddush, but it's really any day. If she took the neder at nighttime, so what's going to happen is Yafar b'leili Shabbos. So you're going to be able to do hafara on when you started the day, which is the Friday night, Uba Yom Shabbos, and now you have the whole Shabbos day, until it gets dark, which that's lahakol, meaning you have a long period of time to be made for the neder. But if nadra im chashecha, if she took the neder by Shabbos Shiddas, it's close to getting dark. So then mefer actually techshech. Then you can only be mefer up until it doesn't get dark, which that's lahachmer. Now you have very little amount of time. Mefer neder, you only have that day that you heard about it. Now the Ran just points out very meduktiv. He says the Mishnah should have said, "Eina mefer ella achatechshech." It's because you're trying to tell me a stringency. It should have said it could only be mefer up until it gets dark, and not achaloi techshech. So he says no. The reason why we said this wording was because it's more appropriate. The next words the Mishnah is going to conclude with. Why? What am I saying? You can be made for only achaloi techshech. Because if it gets dark and they did not do the hafara, then and then they cannot do hafara anymore. Which, as the Ran explains, that's the Mishnah is coming to tell us that mefira nedarim b'Shabbos. Why could you do hafaras nedarim on Shabbos, even if it's not for Shabbos need? Because the timing is going to pass, and that's the explanation of the end of his statement. Because if it gets dark and they didn't do hafara, then you can't do hafara anymore. So that's why we picked the words ad shalei techshech, until it doesn't get dark. It's not ella ad shalei techshech. That's not. We're not trying. We're trying to stress the explanation of then.
For here, it's a minute before it gets dark.
Yeah,
it's done.
Right.
In other words, you didn't even have time to think. But
exactly. If you heard about it, then it's already done. If you really wanted to get, you would say, what happens if he hears it and the second she finishes her words, then he didn't get a chance to even speak it, what would happen then? He didn't get a chance to. Yeah, that's b'yom Shammai. So the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa that it's actually machlokes, this halacha. Hafaras nadarim, the nullification of the vows, says the Tanakhama is kalayim. It's all that day, like the Tana of our Mishnah. But we have two other Tanaim that disagree. Brisa b'Yehuda, they say no, it's me'esli. It's a 24-hour period. When you say it's the day that he hears it, it's a day period. So the Gemara says, explaining each Tana. My time in the Tanakhama, what's the reason of the Tanakhama? That he says it's that day, whether you have more time or less time. Because on the day that he hears it, which sounds like the day that he heard it, and it has to be that day, Monday, Tuesday, whatever it is. What's the reason Rabban? They say no, it's a 24-hour period. We went 3 o'clock on Monday, you go to 3 o'clock Tuesday. Oh, because the Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, miyoim el yoim, from day to day, which sounds like it's on 2 days, but it's only on the one day, so that sounds like a me'esli, so it's called a 24-hour period, which you have from the beginning of one day to the beginning of another day, which is a 24-hour period. So the Gemara says, okay, but now what does each one do with the other one's possible? The Tanna Kama that says b'yom shamai only that day hoksim b'yom el yoim. It says from day to day. Says Gemara Itzrach, no, you need it. Why? The b'yom shamai had only had the pasuk the day that he hears it. I mean, I would have said b'yimama in only during the daytime, but lel yoloi, but not at nighttime because maybe yoim means actually only daytime. So ksim b'yom el yoim, which sounds like from the end of the day before he heard it to the end of the day that he heard it. In other words, if she took a neder in the beginning of the nighttime, which is being made for that nighttime and the day till the end, that's miyoim el yom. From the previous day till the end of this day, to tell you that you have the whole night and the day, because I would have thought to say the night's not included because it's biyoim shamay. Many times in the Gemara we darshan biyoim ain't no batog. Like lulav, it says biyoim only during the day and not at nighttime. So you would thought the same thing over here. Also, somebody say miyoim el yom. Says the Gemara, okay, well the manda miyoim el yom, or what do you do with the other tanoim? That they say that it's a 24-hour period because it's Miyam Yoyim, Haksib B'Yom Shama, but it's on the day that he hears it. Sounds like you don't get a whole 24-hour period. It sounds only on the day that you hear it. Says Itzrach. That's necessary to tell you that it's limited to 24-hour period. Why? Because the Iksib Miyam, if you only had the pasuk from day to day, I wouldn't have thought it means a 24-hour period. I mean, I would have said Michad B'Shaba L'Chad B'Shaba Leifalo. They actually get a week, meaning from this day to that same day, that's in the next week. So I would have said from Sunday to Sunday, miyoim el yoim. So therefore, ksib b'yom shama, it says on the day that he hears it, where you can only be made for it the day that you hear it. And if that's the case, well, obviously, but it says miyoim el yoim. So obviously, the way you would say that, it means to say, yes, a one-day period, which is 24 hours. So that's the machlekes. Now the Gemara concludes, he says, the halacha does not follow like that pair of Tanoim of Rabbi Shimon, and it's only going to be the Yom Shamai. You don't get Me'es Le'es. The Gemara says, Levi Sabal Mebet Kandi Tanoi. Levi thought that he'll do like these two Tanoim, that he'll give the husband a period of 24 hours. Rav said, this is what my, like just like the word doi doi in the Torah means to uncle, or doi doi, ben doi doi, but it means like my beloved. But so Reb Chia, who is the uncle of Rav, he says, in halacha kaisa azog. No, the halacha does not follow like that here, and says the Rav, that's how we rule. Hafagas nadarim is only that day and not more, like the anonymous opinion of our Mishnah. Now the Rav just says parenthetical that we had this teaching of Rav. The Gemara brings now the teaching of Chia bar Rav, who is the son of Rav, that says the following halacha. Chia bar Rav, shodi gida. So it's not interesting in Lakewood. Lakewood, it's a new thing. Everyone's shooting guns or arrows or hatchets or whatever. So it sounds like they had this in those days too. When he was shooting arrows, so he was doing archery. So ubadik, at the same time he was doing archery, the Rav is there. He's shooting, practicing target practice, and someone's asking. They find the Rav in line, so he asks him. He says, "I took a neder on mimata my neder." And as the Rav's in the middle of doing target practice, he asked him, "Nu, do you regret?" And he says, "Yeah, I regret it. Obviously, that's why I'm coming to the Rav." And mimater. What does the Gemara want to tell us? That obviously he held what's called peischin becharata. You could open up a neder with regret. What does that mean? Why is it telling us that he did target practice? So because he didn't have to analyze and sit down with the koyv and say, okay, he's stroking his beard, he's saying, so tell me, when you took this neder, what did you have in mind? Did you realize that your wife's going to be upset at you and whatever? I said, no. So if you needed to make a bona fide Pesach of showing how it's a ta'is meikara, you wouldn't be able to do the target practice at the same time that the constituent is asking you about the shayla. The Gemara is just trying to show that he held Peischim b'charata. That okay, you regret it. Okay, shkayach go weiter, and he continues shooting his arrows. And similarly, Rabbi Bar Avuna Yosef Akoyim. He would sit down, he would get up. In other words, again, he wasn't precise in this. He would be getting up and sitting down, like whatever was happening. Like you come to the Rav over here, he has 100 calls, and he's in the middle of speaking to a guy. He's getting up and coming down. He said, "Hascharata, shlein shkayach guy, l'chaim l'shulam." Thank you for any time by hosting us.